God, disobey him. Well, we turn to the example of Jonah, and we learned that not only Jonah, but we are all capable of developing some bad ideas about God that eventually leads to some faulty reasoning and ultimately to some very bad decisions. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see how those principles apply to our world and personal lives today. Well, for the next couple days, let's take a look at these things from another perspective, from God's perspective. Now, while you might think that that's impossible, we'll soon realize it's very possible through the lens of the Bible. In fact, take a look at the opening verses of Psalm 2. They read like this: "Why are the nations so angry? Why are the people making useless plans? The kings of the earth prepare to fight, and their leaders make plans together against the Lord and his appointed one. They say, 'Let's break the chains that hold us back and throw off the ropes that tie us down.'" Now, if you look at this rather critically, what we see is the questions at the beginning of this psalm are rhetorical, and they're designed to create a sense of bewilderment from the perspective of God. Now, his bewilderment comes from the fact that all people are plotting. That's really the idea created from the reference to nations and kings and leaders. And they're plotting to live outside the boundaries that God has ordained for full and meaningful life. So the puzzling nature of this has to do with the reasoning of people like that, the reasoning that we often employ. It comes from the idea that we can violate or nullify the boundaries of God that he has ordained, and that those violations will ultimately produce the freedom and flourishing that those boundaries are actually designed to provide, while our plotting only ends in slavery and separation from the God who loves us. Now, the disciples in the book of Acts, they viewed the anger and rejection of their nation represented in their religious leaders at Jesus' crucifixion, and that anger and rejection of their own continued preaching of the gospel of Jesus Christ as a fulfillment of these words in Psalm 2. Now, can you see the irony? You see, plotting against what God has done in the sin-atoning sacrifice of his one and only Son is viewed as the very means to true freedom. We're resisting the very thing that brings freedom and fulfillment, flourishing to our lives. No wonder the Lord reveals himself as puzzled here in this psalm. However, isn't this the spirit of the age that we now find ourselves in? In fact, the Lord might be more puzzled than ever, and not by the plotting of the world, but by the pretenses of his own people, like us. Among those of us identifying with Jesus today, growing numbers of us view premarital sex and extramarital sex as a means to the goal of a rich and satisfying life, throwing off the sex-sanctifying, gospel-witnessing boundaries of marriage. Growing numbers of us are viewing the murder of unborn babies through chemical and surgical abortion as a means of family planning, throwing off the sanctity of human life created in the image of God. Growing numbers of us are viewing racism as a means of atoning for and correcting, well, you got it, racism. Or hating our brother and sister as a means of creating a world where we will love our brother and sister. My friends, our nation is on fire in more ways than one, and I'm afraid the flame has spread to us, his church. Our inflamed anger and hatred as part of our natural human condition seems to ravage the landscape of our hearts, homes, cities, and now I'm afraid it may be spreading to our churches. Will you join me this week and step back from the incendiary rhetoric of news reports and op-eds and ask the Lord for his perspective? Take a few moments with me this week and read the book of Lamentations in the next day or so and envision yourself in Jeremiah's shoes watching America burn. Ask the Lord to break our hearts over the things that break his. And we'll pick up in a couple days as we continue to work our way through Psalm 2, asking God to give us his eyes and his heart. I love you all. See you soon.